Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome to our webinar today. The topic is delivering responsive design at scale. So I appreciate everyone taking the time out of your Thursday to join us, and we're really excited about the topic as well as our speaker. So I want to introduce Mike. Mike Kibakowski is a UX designer here at Cantina. Good morning, Mike.
Hello, Clark. How are you doing today?
Good. How's your Thursday going?
It's great, thank you.
Good. So just to read a little bit about the topic today. So we'll be discussing the process for implementing responsive solutions within the enterprise. Mike will focus on responsive metrics, processes, concepts, and deliverables at the strategic level using real-world solutions and data, ensuring that internal conflicts are avoided, encouraging a new way of thinking, and being transparent are required actions in a successful redesign effort. Mike will also discuss how to validate features through customer feedback while setting up next steps on the project. So we'll get started, but a few announcements. Feel free to ask any questions during the webinar. If you just put them in the chat window of GoToMeeting, we'll make sure to see it, and we'll be able to answer them either during the webinar or definitely at the end. We'll have time. The other thing is we are recording this webinar, and that's for the ability to post it on our website so that you can rewatch it if you feel like it, as well as download the slides. So we'll send an email out to everyone with that information. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Hello, and good morning. So today, delivering responsive design at scale. I am Mike Kibakowski. I am an experienced designer here at Cantina. We're a Boston-based agency with about 60 employees working on a variety of projects to help make our clients' products better for their customers. And so today, during our responsive talk, our agenda will include what is responsive, process and deliverables, avoiding internal conflicts, including stakeholders, being transparent, customer validation, and then next steps for some iteration. So before we get into that, let's talk about what is responsive. What does that actually mean? So Wikipedia gives us this great definition that it's an approach aimed at crafting sites to provide an optimal viewing and interaction experience across a wide range of devices. So in layman terms, that means to start building our products device agnostic so that they can work through a range of sizes on devices, and we're not targeting specific current devices. Why does this matter? Why does responsive matter? Well, device viewing generally is on the rise. So last year, mobile devices generated 14 times more traffic than a non-mobile device, and mobile devices grew to almost 8 billion last year in 2015, and that supersedes the estimated Earth population of around 7.3 billion, and that trend is going to continue. In less than 5 years, by the year 2020, it's estimated we'll have 1.5 mobile devices per capita in the entire world, bringing in just shy of 12 billion. And with the increase of devices, mobile purchasing is also increasing. So all online purchases, about 30% of them come from a mobile device. And through some studies, we've seen that shopping carts that are responsive and that are mobile friendly have an average order value of 102% over that of the desktop device on the same site. And some of that is credited to people's impulse buying. So they think of a product that they want or they need, they pull out their phone, and then they're able to purchase it and buy it at that specific moment, rather than having to remember it, going home, getting on their desktop device, ensuring they're on Wi-Fi, and then purchasing it. We've also seen conversion rates on mobile-friendly devices are nearly 3 times those of non-mobile friendly sites. So having a mobile-friendly site actually gets your customers through the checkout process faster and easier, and so that converts into actual dollars. We're also seeing a lot of context switching happening. So now with the amount of devices we have, more than 60% of people use at least 2 devices per day, and almost half of that 60% use at least 3 devices. So they're going from mobile to tablet to mobile, mobile to desktop, and then maybe some sort of IoT device even. And more than half of those folks say that they begin a task on one device and they finish it on another. And so that could be for pleasure, it could be for work, communication, to get a specific job done, for researching. So if they're switching contexts, you want to make sure that your product can provide them the information that they're looking for. And so when you do a responsive redesign, your process and your deliverables are going to be a bit different than your traditional software development methods. So traditionally, you would see things perhaps like a waterfall, where it's very department-based. So your UX team would create your wireframes and maybe your site architecture. That would get passed to the visual design team. That would get passed then to the front-end development team, who would pass it to the back-end development team, who would pass it to DevOps, and then it would be pushed live. And so that has a very monolithic characterization to it, with large features and lack of iterations within those features. Features tend to be very business focused on business goals, and the shipping schedule for those tends to follow whenever that monolithic feature would be finished. So the shipping schedule was a bit varied. With a responsive redesign, you're going to see things like much shorter sprints, so that you can have small iterations and build small feature sets, so that you're able to push and complete code quicker. And this also allows you to build fast, fail fast, and reiterate quickly. You're going to see it's kind of anti-big design. So with the previous method, it might be the design team comes forth with a visual design of full screens, and then it's built, and it's not until it's in production that you realize that the full screens don't work properly, that you're not getting the conversion rates that you want. So this being an anti-big design, design evolves over time through customer validation, through the building, making sure that it works across all your devices, making sure that it's accessible. And your teams will help iterate that design, because your teams will be based more upon features than departments. So instead of having your user experience and then your visual design and then your front-end development, you'll actually pluck people from those specific departments and put them together working on features. So you'll create basically several micro teams that will each consist of UX, visual design, and then your developers, so that they're working together on features so they can understand and foresee any problems that they might encounter. Your features are going to be now more content and user focused. There'll still be business goals and business features tied into that, but you're going to do a lot more user validation, ensuring that the content makes sense and that people can get in and out and finish their tasks efficiently. You're also probably going to see a fixed shipping schedule with the use of continuous integration and deployment. So that could either be multiple pushes to production every day, depending upon your project, or it could be once a week, or it could be after each sprint. But because we're building small feature sets, if something is pushed to production and fails, we can quickly revert that back to a working state, fix it, and then push it up so that that feature is again live. So with this new process also comes some new deliverables. So previously, you'd see things like the full screen mockups, and so you'd get them as a final version or labeled as a specific device. And since we're device agnostic, we don't want that. We want to make sure that the content and the site looks good and works correctly across all devices. And you'd also sometimes see a quote final development package, which could be a zip or a repo of those full screen mockups cut up and built. And again, there wouldn't be any necessarily testing or any validation on that. With a responsive redesign, you're going to see mockups more on a component or module base. And then when you can put those together, you'll start to get some full screen mockups. But this allows us to build the site in a way so that it can be easily plugged together as we add more features. You're going to see a lot of prototypes, and these could be in the form of Envision mockups, Marble, static HTML, CSS, principle, and a variety of other prototyping methods. And these would demonstrate interactions, animations, workflows. They could be used for testing. Depending upon their purpose, kind of defines their fidelity. You will also be getting a pattern library or a style guide, and so that's a living collection of all those components that have been designed, but they're built. And there's documentation on how to use those, how to use the different variations of those. They've all been built so that they're accessible, they're semantic, you can reuse them, and that they actually use some progressive enhancement so that everything across your site works for the baseline of the most basic browsers for the most part. And then any new or any fun functionality, if you will, is built on top of that for people with more modern tools. But this allows everybody to access the content of your site. So with the new process and new deliverables, it changes the way that people work. And so sometimes this can create conflict. And so you want to avoid any internal conflict. And I'll go through a few concepts that you can do to help avoid that. The first one being ensure that ideas and thoughts are heard. And you want to do this from your stakeholders, from your makers, your designers, and your devs, and also from your customers. You want to allow people to express their thoughts and their ideas, and then how, if this is a good business goal or if it's a good user goal, how do we validate that, and how do we move forward? Try to communicate in public as often as possible. And by this, I mean in like a Slack or a HipChat or a Basecamp or even a Jira, something that's company-wide or at least project-wide. It doesn't have, by public, it doesn't have to be external to the company, but something where anybody can check in and see how the project's progress is going. And so being transparent about that progress is very helpful, so you can see what features have been built, what features need to be built, what features are in danger of not making deadlines, who has some extra bandwidth. If somebody asks a question and it's answered, and then a week or two later somebody has that same question, they can find that answer, so it reduces overall communication time. You want to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of each other's roles and responsibilities. So what team is working on what feature, who in that team is a designer or a dev, or is there an overlap on that? Who are the PMs? If you have questions about things, who is the correct person to go to on that? Who has the best architecture knowledge? So this stuff just helps everybody be heard, understood, and nobody's working in a vacuum. So it gives people the sense of ownership, which is very important. And to help facilitate a lot of this, daily stand-ups are highly recommended if you're not doing them. And so these are just a 15-minute phone call, if that, with each team, where each person spends less than a minute talking about what they did yesterday, what they're doing today, and then if they have anything blocking them in their work today or any questions or call-outs. So they'll say what they did yesterday, what they did today. After everyone's done that status, at the end of the phone call, you can talk about blockers or call-outs. If those can't be resolved in another 2 minutes, that should be scheduled for another phone call with just the interested parties, and then the result of that should be documented in your public communication area. So that way, you're not wasting people's time, but you're keeping people informed. And you want to make sure throughout this process that you're including stakeholders. Even though a responsive redesign focuses much more on content and user goals, stakeholders have a ton of domain knowledge, and you want to use that domain knowledge to help influence how the products will work or how it will serve people. And so something you want to do is understand stakeholder goals versus preferences. So if you receive feedback from a stakeholder that the colors need to change, and you ask why, and the stakeholder responds with, these aren't our brand colors, that's a reasonable goal and something that should be investigated. If a stakeholder asks that colors be changed, and when you ask why, they say, because I don't like the color blue, that's a preference, which is stakeholder specific and probably isn't going to be validated through customer validation or customer testing. You want to showcase sprint demos. So if your sprints are 2 or 3 weeks long, at the end of each sprint, you should have a WebEx or a Hangout or some sort of video service that's accessible to everybody in the company. And each team should share what they've accomplished in the past 2 weeks. And so you have one person from each team basically lead that walkthrough. And it's pretty high level. You know, they don't have to go into the nitty-bitty of how they actually built it. But the concepts of what they built, how it'll tie into things, if they're able to reuse from other teams, if the next sprint, if they're going to be collaborating with teams, so that stakeholders can get a sense of the background of what was accomplished over the past 2 weeks. Another item that could be helpful is hosting a staging URL, and this is agreed upon ahead of time, that it's not a QA environment, that things could break, that things could be wrong. But at the end of the day, you're automatically deployed to this URL, so stakeholders can go in and see daily progress. They can start looking and reviewing at some of the content and the workflows. They could see where some business goals are missing. They can bring that back, and then the design team can take that towards customer testing, or they can validate the reason that it's not in there through testing that's already been accomplished. And through these, you want to make sure that you have some sort of consistent method for feedback. So whether that's, again, Slack, HipChat, Jira, Basecamp, or an email newsletter or an email address, you want to make sure that all stakeholders are communicating via the same method, because that's going to make wrangling those comments much easier, and that you're able to gather, analyze, and move on from those comments properly, rather than having someone that has to wrangle them from multiple different sources. All that feedback should be posted somewhere public for the team, and so this is another step in helping to be transparent. And so when working in this redesign, we're going to be working in small teams that aren't department-based, so it's important that these small teams are able to communicate to each other to see who's already built what components that can be reused or what needs to be modified or refactored. And then it's also important that anybody involved in the team can see what's been happening in the project, and so that you're able to communicate together in an open environment. In that open environment, you should include the stakeholders, in my opinion, along with your makers, your devs, and designers, so that as stakeholders find business goals, they can ask the makers, and as I was saying, they can go back and forth and either take it to customer testing or validate the decision for not having it through customer testing. And this helps understand their business and user goals, and then you can help align them together. So a great example of this could be a business goal of needing to increase the newsletter email addresses. So the business goal offers this solution that, hey, we need more newsletter email addresses. Let's do a modal when users enter the site that asks for their email. And the design team could have done user testing on this already and said, well, actually, when there's a modal on entry, we see a 12% drop in users. So we're actually losing 12% of our potential customers before they even get to the site. Through our testing, we hypothesized that if we put the newsletter in the actual page, it still allows people to sign up, but it doesn't become a block. It doesn't become a block in the entry point. So then the design team could mock this up, could prototype it, could test it, and then validate their decision. And if the validation is true, then they could build it into the production site. And so this is important. The customer validation is important because we want to get the product in front of the customer as fast as possible. And there are several ways to do this before you make it to production. So you can do customer testing. So you can do one-on-one testing and some A/B testing. And so your one-on-one is where you sit down with an actual participant and you discuss specific topics. A and B testing is when you have the same design, but one thing has changed, perhaps the media or a call to action button or a specific piece of content, and then that's served to X amount of incoming users, and in theory, whichever one works better whichever one has the better conversion metric is the one you use. When you do one-on-one and user testing, in the beginning of the redesign, you're probably going to be more of a survey interview type of questioning. So you'll ask them, why do you use this product? Why don't you use any competitors' products? What products were you considering when you made this purchase? What do we think your pain points are? And things of that nature. And then as you begin prototyping, you can actually see people going through the workflow. And so you can ask them to complete jobs and watch where they struggle and see their actual pain points. And then you can take that data to help influence your design features. You also want to look at some of your analytics, so your conversion rates and your device usage. So your conversion rates are helpful in seeing where people are dropping off, and then you can look at your actual site and see what is there that's obstructing people. And even though we're being device agnostic, the device usage is nice because then you can actually compare it to some of your conversion rates. So if you're noticing that users on an iPhone 6, which has a taller screen, have an 80% conversion rate of adding stuff to the cart compared to iPhone 5 users, you might ask yourself why. And so then upon testing that, you might notice that the add to cart button is actually below all of the content. So iPhone 5 users are totally missing it. So you might hypothesize by moving the add to cart button to the top of the screen, this will increase the conversion ratio. And so then you would hypothesize, prototype, test it, see results, and if the results are true, then you can implement it in production. And these things, your customer testing and your analytics and customer validation in general, they're not something that should just be done before and then after redesign. It should be done before, during, and after, and continue on as the site evolves. And finally, you want to have measurable goals so that you're able to test your theories to see if these features that you've been building are working. And so an example of that, a potential measurable goal would be, we'll know this redesign is successful when shopping cart drop-offs are reduced by 25% in 6 months. And so what this does is it gives you a specific action, the shopping cart drop-offs, the quantifier, the reduced, your metric, 25%, and then your timeline of 6 months. And if in 6 months it's 23%, this isn't a failed goal, you're still 23% better than you were. But then it gives you the ability to address either existing pain points that were lower on the ranking, or perhaps there are new pain points that you can work off of that. And you typically, on your measurable goals, you want to give a bit of time so that you can get some quality data, so you can get some quality quantity data so that you can compare it to. And so this is a very similar, this is how we work a lot at Cantina. So although this is presented in a linear fashion, it's very circular, if you will. So there's a vision, there's a concept, there's an idea for a feature. We define what it is and test it with users. We design, we test it with users, we deliver, and then we measure those actual outputted goals. So we start from many untested ideas, this grid of 9 blocks, and then we work until it's this validated feature that we've gotten real customer feedback on. And so after the redesign, and I use the word after in quotes, your next steps are to continue iteration. So you want to continue to gather analytics on your devices and conversion rates, and this is going to help keeping your measurable goals updated. And so this is so that when you're continuing your customer validation, you can compare this to your current measurable goals, if your goals have to change, if you've hit goals or if you haven't hit goals, why is the answer for either one of those. That helps make data-informed decisions so that everything that's being built has logic and reason behind it. As these features are being tested and approved, that your pattern library is being updated to reflect these changes so that when there are new developers or a new team or a new feature come in, they can look at the pattern library, reference successful validated features and then use those to continue building. And you want to remember, throughout this entire redesign, the product is always evolving. It's never finished. So even after the engagement or after the site is put live, there should still be iteration going on. There should still be testing. You should be trying to get the drop-off conversions smaller, get your successful metrics greater, and so that you can constantly be working towards creating a better product for your users. So some takeaways to help with your responsive redesign. Be transparent and open within your organization. Validate your features with customers, ideally as soon as possible through prototypes and user testing. Avoid conflicts through open communication, so ensuring that everybody knows where the project is and what's happening within it. And be device agnostic, so make sure that your product works across the board at any viewport size, because that not only helps everybody that has all of today's devices, but it's going to help when the devices of tomorrow come out and your product already works on those. So if you're interested, if you want more, I'll be going deeper into the technical side of things, of the architecture and concepts of this at Creative Tech Week in New York City on May 2nd. There's a link to register on the Cantina site. And if you have any questions for me directly after this talk, or you want to chat for a little bit, please feel free to email me at mkibakowski@cantina.co. And I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Great. Thank you, Mike. That was very comprehensive and very informative. So we do have a couple questions that come through. One is about the process changes that are necessary to do a successful redesign. Can you talk a little bit about ways a team can learn about them and be successful at implementing them? And I'm going to assume that the person who wrote this question is wanting to know, like, do you attend conferences? Do you bring in speakers? You know, what are some ways that a team is unfamiliar could really learn about how to do the process better?
Yep. So that's a good question. So learning to do the process better, conference is always a big help. Reading a lot of books, so a lot of the event apart books or book apart books have been really good. And then slowly implementing some of these changes is also helpful. If you have a large product team and you don't want to disrupt everybody overnight, slowly integrating the open communication, so taking everything from the private one-on-one emails over to Slack can be a transition. So something like that will help your process. Starting to create micro teams on specific features will definitely be helpful, because then people will see the value of it and how much faster things can get tested. And then recording user interviews and people using prototypes and then sharing that with anybody involved in the process is very eye-opening, because people can then see how users are using their products, and understanding that, if we spend 6 months on this one feature and it fails because we haven't validated it, that's a lot of wasted time and money. But if we do a small team, do a small prototype in 1 week, we can validate that idea much quicker.
And you recommended some books. What are some of the names that people could look up on Amazon or something? Are they just called?
There's There's Responsive Web Design by Karen McGrain, and there's I'm drawing a blank. Any of the responsive books on List Apart.
Okay, yeah, we'll probably post them to our Twitter. So if folks online are interested, just head over to our Twitter account. We'll post them. We'll post links right after with those book recommendations from Mike. One other question has come through, and it's about business goals. So someone's asking about who comes up with them, who is essentially responsible. Is it a collaborative effort, or do they come directly from the client?
So I think that depends. So there's a variety of business goals. There are some that come from very high up, which is increase sales by 7% or something like that. And then there are smaller ones that are such as we need to increase, or we need to get a better conversion rate of our shopping cart. Now, granted, those two would align with each other, because in theory, if you create a better shopping cart experience, you're going to get a better conversion in sales. So you have different levels of business goals that come in, and so having all those stakeholders, again, using open communication and being able to talk with each other and with the makers, you can start to align features for testing. So you could hypothesize, in order to satisfy the business goal of a better shopping cart or decreasing the drop-off rate, we hypothesize making it one form for easy checkout, one-tap checkout. And then we hypothesize that that creating a better shopping cart will increase sales, et cetera, and then you're able to measure those goals based upon that.
Great.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So if there are not any questions, we'll wrap up early today. A few things just so we close out the webinar. As I mentioned, we will be posting the slides as well as the recording of this webinar to our website. We'll send an email out to everyone, but usually it's about a week after once it's all said and done. We are having another webinar on April 14th, and that one is called Business Implications for Pre-Framework Implementations. It's around technical design and being able to build these frameworks for the business side. So we'll obviously send everyone out an invite to that, so look forward to that when it comes through. And if any of this has been interesting or you have questions, feel free to reach out to Mike. You can also tweet at us or email us at hello@cantina.co. And if you have a project that you think we may be a good fit for, use those channels to also reach out, and we'd be happy to talk to you about how we can help. So I thank you, everyone, for being on the line, taking time on your Thursday to be with us, and we look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar. Have a wonderful day, and take care.